The glorious Quran mentions no less than 11 times that the human being is created from nutfa, which means a minute quantity of liquid or a trickle of liquid which remains after emptying a cup. This is mentioned in several verses of the Quran, including chapters 22 verse 5 and chapter 23 verse 13. Science has confirmed in recent times that only 1 out of an average of 3 million sperms is required for fertilizing the ovum. This means that only a 1 to 3 millionth part, or 0.00003% of the quantity of sperms that are emitted, is required for fertilization. In 1925, an American astronomer by the name of Edwin Hubble provided observational evidence that all galaxies are receding from one another, which implies that the universe is expanding. The expansion of the universe is now an established scientific fact. This is what Al-Quran says regarding the nature of the universe. With the power and skill did we construct the firmament, for it is we who create the vastness of space. Al-Quran 51:47. The Arabic word musi'un is correctly translated as expanding it, and it refers to the creation of the expanding vastness of the universe. Stephen Hawking, in his book A Brief History of Time, says, "The discovery that the universe is expanding was one of the great intellectual revolutions of the 20th century. The Quran mentioned the expansion of the universe before even man learned how to build a telescope." Honey has healing properties. The bee assimilates juices of various kinds of flowers and fruit and forms within its body the honey, which it stores in its cells of wax. Only a couple of centuries ago, man came to know that honey comes from the belly of the bee. This fact was mentioned in the Quran 1400 years ago in the following verse. "There issues from within their bodies a drink of varying colors, wherein is healing for men." Al-Quran chapter 16, verse 69. We are now aware that honey has a healing property and also a mild antiseptic property. The Russians used honey to cover their wounds in World War II. The wound would retain moisture and would leave very little scar tissue. Due to the density of honey, no fungus or bacteria would grow in the wound. A person suffering from an allergy of a particular plant may be given honey from that plant so that the person develops resistance to that allergy. Honey is rich in fructose and vitamin K. Thus, the knowledge contained in the Quran regarding honey, its origin and properties, was far ahead of the time it was revealed. Every living thing is made of water. Consider the following Quranic verse. "Do not the unbelievers see that the heavens and the earth were joined together as one unit of creation before we clove them asunder? We made from water every living thing. Will they not then believe?" Al-Quran chapter 21, verse 30. Only after advances have been made in science do we now know that cytoplasm, the basic substance of the cell, is made up of 80% water. Modern research has also revealed that most organisms consist of 50 to 90% water and that every living entity requires water for its existence. Was it possible 14 centuries ago for any human being to guess that every living being was made of water? Moreover, would such a guess be conceivable by a human being in the deserts of Arabia where there has always been scarcity of water? The following verse refers to the creation of animals from water. "And Allah has created every animal from water." Al-Quran chapter 24, verse 45. The following verse refers to the creation of human beings from water. "It is He who has created man from water. Then has He established relationships of lineage and marriage, for thy Lord has power over all things." Al-Quran chapter 25, verse 54. Plants created in pairs, male and female. Previously, humans did not know that plants too have male and female gender distinctions. Botany states that every plant has a male and female gender. Even the plants that are unisexual have distinct elements of both male and female. "And He has sent down water from the sky. With it we have produced diverse pairs of plants, each separate from the others." Al-Quran chapter 20, verse 53. Human beings created from sulala, or quintessence of liquid. "And made his progeny from a quintessence of the nature of a fluid despised." Al-Quran chapter 32, verse 8. The Arabic word sulala means quintessence or the best part of a whole. We have come to know now that only one single spermatozoon that penetrates the ovum is required for fertilization, out of the several millions produced by man. That one spermatozoon out of several millions is referred in the Quran as sulala. Sulala also means gentle extraction from a fluid. The fluid refers to both male and female germinal fluids containing gametes. Both ovum and sperm are gently extracted from their environments in the process of fertilization. The bee. And thy Lord taught the bee to build its cells in hills, on trees, and in men's habitations, then to eat of all the produce of the earth, and find with skill the spacious paths of its Lord. Al-Quran, chapter 16, verses 68 through 69. Von Frisch received the Nobel Prize in 1973 for his research on the behavior and communication of bees. The bee, after discovering any new garden or flower, goes back and tells its fellow bees the exact direction and map to get there, which is known as bee dance. The meanings of this insect's movements that are intended to transmit information between worker bees have been discovered scientifically using photography and other methods. The Quran mentions in the above verse how the bee finds with skill the spacious paths of its Lord. The worker bee, or the soldier bee, is actually a female bee. In Surah An-Nahl, chapter 16, verses 68 through 69, the gender used for the bee is the female gender, fasluki and kuli, indicating that the bee that leaves its home for gathering food is a female bee. In other words, the soldier or worker bee is a female bee. In fact, in Shakespeare's play Henry IV, some of the characters speak about bees and mention that the bees are soldiers and that they have a king. That is what people thought in Shakespearean times. They thought that the worker bees are male bees and that they go home and are answerable to a king bee. This, however, is not true. The worker bees are females and they do not report to a king bee but to a queen bee. But it took modern investigations in the last 300 years to discover this. Winds impregnate the clouds. And we send the fecundating winds, then cause the rain to descend from the sky, therewith providing you with water in abundance. Al-Quran, chapter 15, verse 22. The Arabic word used here is lawaqih, which is the plural of laqih from laqaha, which means to impregnate or fecundate. In this context, impregnate means that the wind pushes the clouds together, increasing the condensation that causes lightning and thus rain. A similar description is found in the Quran. It is Allah who sends the winds, and they raise the clouds. Then does He spread them in the sky as He wills and break them into fragments, until thou seest raindrops issue from the midst thereof. Then when He has made them such of His servants as He wills, behold, they do rejoice. Al-Quran, chapter 30, verse 48. The Quranic descriptions are absolutely accurate and agree perfectly with modern data on hydrology. The sun will extinguish after a certain period. The light of the sun is due to a chemical process on its surface that has been taking place continuously for the past 5 billion years. It will come to an end at some point of time in the future when the sun will be totally extinguished, leading to the extinction of all life on earth. Regarding the impermanence of the sun's existence, the Quran says, "And the sun runs its course for a period determined for it. That is the decree of Him, the exalted in might, the all-knowing." Al-Quran 36:38. The Arabic word used here is mustaqar, which means a place of time that is determined. Thus the Quran says that the sun runs towards a determined place and will do so only up to a predetermined period of time, meaning that it will end or extinguish. This is Iman Haggag recording Spider's Web or Home is Fragile. The Quran mentions in Surah Al-Ankabut, the parable of those who take protectors other than Allah is that of the spider, who builds to itself a house, but truly the flimsiest of houses is the spider's house, if but they knew. Al-Quran, chapter 29, verse 41. Besides giving the physical description of the spider's web as being very flimsy, delicate, and weak, the Quran also stresses on the flimsiness of the relationship in the spider's house, where the female spider many times kills its mate, the male spider. For a long time, European philosophers and scientists believed that the Earth stood still in the center of the universe and every other body, including the sun, moved around it. In the West, this geocentric concept of the universe was prevalent right from the time of Ptolemy in the 2nd century BC. In 1512, Nicholas Copernicus put forward his heliocentric theory of planetary motion, which asserted that the sun is motionless at the center of the solar system with the planets revolving around it. In 1609, the German scientist Johannes Kepler published the Astronomia Nova. In this piece, he concluded that not only do the planets move in elliptical orbits around the sun, they also rotate upon their axes at irregular speeds. With this knowledge, it became possible for European scientists to explain correctly many of the mechanisms of the solar system, including the sequence of night and day. After these discoveries, it was thought that the sun was stationary and did not rotate about its axis like the Earth. I remember having studied this fallacy from geography books during my school days. Consider the following Quranic verse. It is He who created the night and the day, and the sun and the moon. All the celestial bodies swim along, each in its rounded course. Al-Quran 21:33. The Arabic word used in the above verse is yasbahun. The word yasbahun is derived from the word sabaha. It carries with it the idea of motion that comes from any moving body. If you use the word for a man on the ground, it would not mean that he is rolling, but would mean he is walking or running. If you use the word for a man in water, it would not mean that he is floating, but would mean that he is swimming. Similarly, if you use the word yasbah for a celestial body such as the sun, it would not mean that it is only flying through space, but would rather mean that it is also rotating as it goes through space. Most of the school textbooks have incorporated the fact that the sun rotates about its axis. The rotation of the sun about its own axis can be proved with the help of an equipment that projects the image of the sun on the tabletop so that one can examine the image of the sun without being blinded. It is noticed that the sun has spots which complete a circular motion once every 25 days, i.e., the sun takes approximately 25 days to rotate around its axis. In fact, the sun travels through space at roughly 150 miles per second and takes about 200 million years to complete one revolution around the center of our Milky Way galaxy. It is not permitted to the sun to catch up to the moon, nor can the night outstrip the day. Each just swims along in its own orbit, according to law. Al-Quran 36:40. The above verse mentions an essential fact discovered by modern astronomy, i.e., the existence of the individual orbits of the sun and the moon and their journey through space with their own motion. The fixed place towards which the sun travels, carrying with it the solar system, has been located exactly by modern astronomy. It has been given a name, the solar apex. The solar system is indeed moving in space towards a point situated in the constellation of Hercules, the Alpha layer, whose exact location is firmly established. The moon rotates around its axis in the same duration that it takes to revolve around the Earth. It takes approximately 29.5 days to complete one rotation. One cannot help but be amazed at the scientific accuracy of the Quran. The existence of subatomic particles. In ancient times, a well-known theory by the name of theory of atomism was widely accepted. This theory was originally proposed by the Greeks, in particular a man named Democritus, who lived about 23 centuries ago. Democritus and the people that came after him assumed that the smallest unit of matter was the atom. The Arabs used to believe the same. The Arabic word dharra is most commonly meant an atom. In recent times, modern science has discovered that it is possible to split even an atom. That the atom can be split further is a development of the 20th century. 14 centuries ago, this concept would have appeared unusual, even to an Arab. For him, the dharra was the limit beyond one could not go. The following Quranic verse, however, refuses to acknowledge this limit. The unbelievers say, "Never to us will come the hour," say, "Nay, but most surely by my Lord, it will come upon you, by him who knows the unseen, from whom is not hidden the least little atom in the heavens or on earth, nor is there anything less than that, or greater, but is in the record perspicuous." Al-Quran, chapter 34, verse 3. This verse refers to the omniscience of God, his knowledge of all things, hidden or apparent. It then goes further and says that God is aware of everything, including what is smaller or bigger than the atom. Thus, the verse clearly shows that it is possible for something smaller than the atom to exist, a fact only discovered recently by modern science. The flight of the birds. Regarding the flight of birds, the Quran says, "Do they not look at the birds, held poised in the midst of the air and the sky? Nothing holds them up but the power of Allah. Verily in this are signs for those who believe." Al-Quran, chapter 16, verse 79. A similar message is repeated in the Quran in the verse, "Do they not observe the birds above them, spreading their wings and folding them in? None can uphold them except Allah most gracious. Truly it is He that watches over all things." Al-Quran, chapter 67, verse 19. The Arabic word amsaka literally means to put one's hand on, seize, hold someone back, which expresses the idea that Allah holds the bird up in His power. These verses stress the extremely close dependence of the bird's behavior on divine order. Modern scientific data has shown the degree of perfection attained by certain species of birds with regard to the programming of their movements. It is only the existence of a migratory program in the genetic code of the birds that can explain the long and complicated journey that very young birds, without any prior experience and without any guide, are able to accomplish. They are also able to return to the departure point on a definite date. Professor Hamburger, in his book Power and Fragility, gives the example of a mutton bird that lives in the Pacific, with its journey of over 15,000 miles in the shape of a figure 8. It makes this journey over a period of 6 months and comes back to its departure point with a maximum delay of 1 week. The highly complicated instructions for such a journey have to be contained in the bird's nervous cells. They are definitely programmed. Should we not reflect on the identity of this programmer?